Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live without electricity, without running water, without any of the modern conveniences we take for granted today? What if I told you about a time when a single candle was precious enough to change a family's entire evening routine? What would you do if your survival depended on reading the weather patterns, knowing which berries were safe to eat, and making every single item you needed with your own two hands? Tonight, I'm going to take you on a gentle journey back to 1742, a small colonial village in Massachusetts, where we'll follow Martha Henderson through just one ordinary day that will reveal the extraordinary challenges, ingenuity, and quiet courage of colonial American life. But here's the question that might keep you wondering. How did people find joy and meaning in such a harsh, uncertain world? Let's discover together. 4:30 a.m. Close your eyes and imagine it's still dark outside. The year is 1740, and in a small wooden house in Colonial, Massachusetts, Martha Henderson stirs in her bed as the first rooster crows in the distance. But this isn't the gentle wake-up call you might expect. You see, Martha has been awake for several minutes already, listening carefully to the sounds around her home. Why was she listening so intently, you might wonder? In colonial America, the sounds of the early morning could tell you everything you needed to know about the day ahead. The way the wind moved through the trees, whether the chickens sounded calm or agitated, if she could hear her neighbor's cow lowing in distress. These weren't just background noises. They were survival signals. Martha, now 34 years old, had learned these lessons the hard way. She'd been born in this very house, watched her parents navigate the countless challenges of colonial life, and now she faced them herself with her husband, Thomas, and their 3 children. Young Samuel, age 12, little Mary, age 8, and baby Elizabeth, just 14 months old. As she quietly slips from the bed, she shares with Thomas, being careful not to wake the baby sleeping in her cradle nearby. Martha faces her first challenge of the day. The fire in their main room has died down to mere embers during the night, and without it, the house has grown cold enough that she can see her breath. Now, you might think, just light it back up, right? But here's what made this moment so critical. If those embers had died completely, Martha would need to walk nearly a mile to her nearest neighbor to borrow some live coals. In the harsh New England winter, this could mean the difference between a warm breakfast and a cold, miserable start to the day. Have you ever tried to restart a fire from just barely glowing embers? Let me tell you about Martha's delicate morning ritual. She kneels beside the large stone fireplace, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The family had only 2 pairs of shoes between all of them, and those were saved for church on Sundays or trips to town. From a small basket beside the hearth, she takes out pieces of birch bark that she and the children had carefully peeled and dried during the previous autumn. But here, where colonial life gets really interesting. Martha couldn't just crumple up the bark and hope for the best. She had to layer it in a very specific way. First, the finest pieces, almost like paper. Then, gradually, thicker pieces. And finally, small twigs arranged just so. One wrong move, one piece placed incorrectly, and the precious embers would die out completely as she works. Martha thinks about her grandmother's stories of the early days of the settlement, when families actually died from losing their fires on cold winter nights. It seems almost impossible to imagine now, doesn't it? But in 1740, fire wasn't just comfort, it was life itself. The birch bark catches, and Martha breathes a small sigh of relief. She adds slightly larger pieces of wood, then larger ones still, building the fire slowly and carefully. This process alone takes nearly 15 minutes, but it's time well spent. This fire will burn all day, providing heat for cooking, warmth for the family, and light for their work. But Martha's morning challenges are just beginning. What do you think was the most difficult part of a colonial woman's morning routine? Drop your guess in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 5 a.m. with the fire crackling safely, Martha faces her next challenge: water. And this isn't as simple as turning a faucet, as you well know. In colonial New England, water was both abundant and scarce at the same time. Abundant because of all the streams and rivers, but scarce because getting it was dangerous, time-consuming, and sometimes impossible. You see, the Henderson family's well was located about 50 yards from their house, and in the winter, it often froze over. But that's not even the biggest challenge. The real problem was that Martha never knew if the water would be safe to drink. Let me paint you a picture of something that might surprise you. In colonial times, many families actually drank beer for breakfast. Yes, even the children. Not because they wanted to, but because it was often safer than water. The brewing process killed many of the harmful bacteria that could make the family sick. But Martha was fortunate. Her family had managed to dig their well in just the right spot, where a natural spring provided relatively clean water year-round. Still, she never took this for granted. Every morning, she would draw up the first bucket and examine it carefully, looking for any cloudiness, any unusual smell, or any signs that animals might have gotten into the water supply. As she walks through the pre-dawn darkness toward the well, carrying her heavy wooden bucket, Martha thinks about her friend Sarah from the next village over. Just last month, Sarah's entire family had fallen ill with what they called the flux, what we might know today as dysentery. It had started with bad water, and little Sarah had lost 2 of her children before the illness ran its course. This is the reality that makes Martha's careful examination of each bucket of water not just a routine, but a matter of life and death. She dips her finger into the cold water and tastes it, slightly metallic as always, but clean. She says a small prayer of gratitude, as she does every morning. But here's where colonial ingenuity really shines. Martha doesn't just bring one bucket back to the house. She makes 4 trips, filling a large wooden barrel that sits near the fireplace. Why so much water? Because this one supply needs to last the family for cooking, cleaning, and drinking for the entire day. If someone gets sick, if there's an accident, if an unexpected visitor arrives, this water needs to cover all possibilities. And here, something that might amaze you. Martha can tell you exactly how much water each member of her family uses in a day. Samuel, being the oldest boy and helping with the hardest chores, uses about 3 cups for drinking and washing. Little Mary uses about 2 cups. Baby Elizabeth needs water for cleaning and for thinning her food. Thomas uses the most, nearly 6 cups between his morning wash, his drinking water for the day, and cleaning his tools. This level of resource management was essential for survival, but it also created an incredible awareness of conservation that we rarely see today. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be wasted. As Martha carries her final bucket back to the house, she notices that the sky is beginning to lighten just slightly in the east. In colonial times, people lived so closely connected to natural light that they could tell the time within minutes just by looking at the sky. Martha knows it's about 5:20 a.m., time to wake the children and begin the morning meal. But first, she faces another challenge that would test her skill and patience. 5:30 a.m. Now, you might think making breakfast in colonial times was simply a matter of throwing some food in a pot over the fire. But let me tell you about the intricate dance that Martha performs every single morning. A routine so complex and dangerous that one small mistake could ruin the family's food for the entire day. Martha approaches her fire, now burning steadily, and begins to arrange what she calls her cooking tools. These aren't the neat, matched sets you might imagine. Her main pot is made of iron and weighs nearly 12 pounds when empty. It hangs on a strong iron hook that swings over the fire and adjusting the height of this pot, raising it higher for gentle simmering or lowering it closer to the flames for faster cooking, requires both strength and skill. But here's what makes this morning particularly challenging. The family is running low on their stored cornmeal, and Martha needs to make their remaining supplies last until the next harvest. This means she needs to be extremely creative with their breakfast. In colonial times, the main breakfast food was something called hasty pudding, essentially a thick porridge made from cornmeal, water, and whatever else the family could spare. But Martha has learned to transform this simple dish into something that will keep her family satisfied and healthy all morning long. She starts by putting about 3 cups of water into her heavy pot and positioning it over the fire. While waiting for it to heat, she measures out exactly 3/4 of a cup of their precious cornmeal. Every grain counts, so she uses a small wooden spoon to level the measurement precisely. But here's Martha's secret, something she learned from her mother, who learned it from her mother before her. Just before the water begins to boil, she adds a handful of dried berries that the family collected last summer. These are unjust for flavor they provide, essential nutrients that help prevent scurvy and other diseases common in colonial times. As she slowly stirs the cornmeal into the heating water, Martha must maintain constant attention. Stir too little, and the mixture will develop lumps that could be impossible to remove. Stir too much, and it becomes tough and unpleasant to eat. The stirring rhythm is something she learned as a young girl. A steady, circular motion that keeps the mixture smooth while allowing it to cook evenly. While the hasty pudding cooks, Martha prepares what the family calls their morning drink. This isn't coffee or tea. Those luxuries are far too expensive for a colonial farming family. Instead, she creates a warm drink from roasted chicory root, sweetened with a tiny bit of maple sugar that Thomas had traded for last fall. But brewing this drink presents its own challenge. The chicory root must be ground fresh each morning using a small hand grinder, a process that takes nearly 10 minutes of continuous cranking. The sound of this grinding is actually Martha's signal to the rest of the family that breakfast will be ready soon. As she grinds the chicory, Martha thinks about how different meal preparation was from her grandmother's stories of the old country back in England. There, her grandmother had told her, families could buy bread from bakers, milk from dairy farmers, and meat from butchers. Here in colonial America, every single thing the family ate had to be grown, raised, hunted, gathered, or made by their own hands. The hasty pudding is nearly ready now, thick and smooth, with the dried berries adding little bursts of sweetness throughout. Martha tastes it carefully, not just for flavor, but to make sure it's cooked properly. Undercooked cornmeal can cause stomach problems that could lay a person up for days. But as she prepares to serve the meal, Martha discovers a problem that threatens to disrupt the entire morning routine. What do you think went wrong with Martha's breakfast preparation? And more importantly, how do you think colonial families dealt with unexpected problems when they had no stores to run to, no backup plans except their own creativity and resourcefulness? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're finding this journey through colonial life as fascinating as I hoped you would, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps other people discover these amazing stories from our past. 6 a.m. The problem, Martha discovered, was both simple and potentially serious. Her youngest, baby, Elizabeth, had developed a slight fever during the night. In our modern world, this might mean a quick trip to the doctor or some children's medication. But in 1740, a baby's fever could quickly become a family crisis, as Martha gently touches Elizabeth's forehead. Feeling the heat that indicates the fever, she makes quick mental calculations. Does she have enough of the willow bark tea that helps reduce fevers? Are there any other symptoms she should watch for? Should she send Samuel to fetch the village's herb woman, Goodwife Adams, who lived nearly 2 miles away? These decisions couldn't wait. In colonial times, illnesses progressed rapidly, and without modern medicine, early intervention with traditional remedies was often the difference between recovery and tragedy. Martha makes her decision quickly. She wakes Thomas first, speaking quietly so as not to disturb the other children. "The baby has a fever," she whispers, and immediately Thomas understands the seriousness. He sits up in bed, and together they examine little Elizabeth more carefully. Her breathing seems normal, and she doesn't appear to be in distress, but her skin is definitely warmer than usual. "I'll send Samuel for Goodwife Adams after breakfast," Thomas decides. "But let's see how she fares with some willow bark tea first." This kind of quick, practical decision-making was essential for colonial families. They couldn't afford to panic, but they also couldn't afford to ignore potential problems. Every choice had to balance the immediate needs against the family's limited resources and the reality that help, when available, was often hours away. While Martha prepares a small cup of willow bark tea for the baby, Thomas quietly wakes Samuel. Now, you have to understand that Samuel, at 12 years old, wasn't considered a child by colonial standards. He was nearly a young adult, expected to take on serious responsibilities and handle challenges that would seem impossible for a 12-year-old today. "Samuel," Thomas says quietly, "your sister has a fever. I need you to be ready to ride to Goodwife Adams' house if your mother thinks it is necessary." Samuel nods seriously and begins to dress. He understands that this is a request. It is a responsibility that could affect the entire family well-being. At 12, he's already an experienced rider and knows the roads between their village and the neighboring settlements. Meanwhile, Martha wakes little Mary with a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mary, at 8 years old, also has important responsibilities in the household. She's in charge of feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, and helping with Elizabeth when Martha is busy with other chores. "Mary, sweetheart," Martha says softly, "Elizabeth isn't feeling well this morning, so I need you to be extra helpful today. Can you do that for me?" Mary sits up immediately, completely awake in that way children have. She fares sick, Mama. She has a small fever, but we're going to take good care of her, Martha reassures her daughter. After breakfast, I need you to gather extra eggs and make sure our chickens have plenty of fresh water. Can you handle that? This interaction shows us something beautiful about colonial families. Children were given real responsibilities, but they were also protected and reassured. Mary understands that she has important work to do, but she's not frightened because her parents are handling the situation calmly and competently. As the family gathers around their simple wooden table for breakfast, Martha serves the hasty pudding, still warm and comforting. The dried berries have softened during cooking, adding natural sweetness throughout the thick porridge. Thomas says a brief prayer, thanking God for their food and asking for Elizabeth's quick recovery. But even during this peaceful family moment, each person is mentally preparing for the challenges the day might bring. Colonial life didn't allow for leisurely mornings or gradual wake-ups. From the moment they opened their eyes, every family member needed to be alert, responsible, and ready to adapt to whatever circumstances arose. As they eat, Martha watches Elizabeth carefully, noting that the baby seems to be drinking the willow bark tea without resistance and does appear to be getting worse. These are good signs, but Martha knows she needs to monitor the situation closely all day. Thomas discusses the day's work plans with Samuel. The winter wheat needs checking. The firewood supply is running lower than he'd like, and there are repairs needed on the chicken coop before the next storm arrives. In colonial times, every day brought a list of essential tasks that couldn't be postponed. But as the family finishes their breakfast and prepares to begin their daily chores, an unexpected sound from outside changes everything. What do you think that sound might have been? A neighbor in distress, wild animals threatening the livestock, or something else entirely that would test this family's ability to handle multiple crises at once. Keep listening to find out. And if you're enjoying this gentle journey through colonial life, I'd be grateful if you consider sharing this video with someone else who might find these stories interesting. There's so much more to discover about how our ancestors lived, loved, and survived in ways that seem almost magical to us today. 6:30 a.m. The sound that interrupted the Henderson family's breakfast was the unmistakable rhythm of a horse approaching at a fast gallop. Never a good sign in colonial times. Thomas immediately stands and moves to the small window, peering out into the gray morning light. Martha instinctively moves closer to baby Elizabeth, while Samuel and Mary freeze in place, listening intently. In colonial communities, everyone understood that unexpected visitors could bring news of Indian raids, dangerous weather approaching, or family emergencies that might require immediate assistance. "It's Jonathan Miller," Thomas announces, recognizing their neighbor. Even in the dim light, something's wrong. Jonathan Miller lived about 3 miles away with his wife, Rebecca, and their 4 children. He was a steady, reliable man who wouldn't ride hard to someone's house unless the situation was serious. Thomas quickly opens the heavy wooden door, and Martha can hear Jonathan's voice, breathless from his urgent ride. "Thomas, thank God you're awake. Rebecca's time has come, but something's not right. The baby. It's not positioned properly, and Goodwife Adams is already with the Prescott family. Their little one took sick yesterday, and she couldn't leave." Martha immediately understands the crisis. Rebecca Miller is about to give birth, but with complications that could threaten both mother and baby. In colonial times, childbirth was always dangerous. But a difficult birth without an experienced midwife could easily become tragic. Here, what makes this moment so critical? Martha is one of only 3 women in their immediate area who has experience helping with difficult births. She learned these skills from her own mother and has successfully assisted with several challenging deliveries over the years. But leaving her own family, especially with baby Elizabeth running a fever, creates an almost impossible choice. "How long has Rebecca been laboring?" Martha asks, already mentally preparing for what she might need to do. "Since before midnight," Jonathan replies. "The pains are strong, but nothing's happening." "She's asking for you specifically, Martha. She trusts you." This is the reality of colonial community life. Everyone depended on everyone else for survival, but helping others sometimes meant making painful sacrifices for your own family's needs. Thomas and Martha exchange a long look, communicating in the way that couples do after years of marriage. They both understand the situation perfectly. Rebecca Miller needs Martha's help, but Elizabeth needs her mother's care. "I'll go," Martha says quietly. "Thomas, can you manage Elizabeth's fever and send Samuel for Goodwife Adams if things get worse?" But Thomas has a different idea, one that shows the incredible resourcefulness and cooperation that made colonial communities work. "What if we all go?" he suggests. "We can bring Elizabeth with us, and Mary can help watch her while you assist Rebecca. Samuel can ride ahead to the Prescott place and ask Goodwife Adams to come to the Millers as soon as she can. That way, Elizabeth stays with you. Rebecca gets the help she needs, and we're all together if any emergency develops." This solution perfectly demonstrates colonial problem solving. Instead of choosing between competing needs, find a way to address multiple challenges simultaneously. But it also creates new risks. Traveling with a sick baby in cold weather, disrupting their entire day's work schedule, and managing a complex birth while caring for their own family. It says a lot to take on. Martha considers the options quickly. In colonial times, you couldn't spend hours deliberating over decisions. You had to trust your experience, make the best choice possible with limited information, and then commit fully to making it work. Yes, she decides, we'll all go. Mary, help me gather what we'll need for Elizabeth and for helping with the birth. Samuel, saddle your horse and ride to the Prescott place. Tell Goodwife Adams that Rebecca Miller is in labor with complications and needs her as soon as possible, within minutes. The Henderson family transforms from a quiet breakfast scene into an organized response team. Martha quickly packs herbs and supplies she might need for both Elizabeth and Rebecca. Willow bark for fever, raspberry leaf tea to help with labor, clean cloths, and other essential items. Thomas harnesses their horse to the small cart they use for longer journeys, making sure there are warm blankets for Elizabeth and space for Martha to work if needed. Mary helps gather extra food and water, understanding that they might be gone for many hours. Samuel mounts his horse and prepares to ride hard to the Prescott place. At 12, he is trusted with this crucial mission, finding Goodwife Adams and convincing her to come help with the birth as soon as possible. As they prepare to leave, Martha faces another difficult decision. Should she bring Elizabeth in the cold morning air, risking making her fever worse? Or would the baby be safer staying warm by their own fire with Thomas? But before she can decide, baby Elizabeth makes the choice for them. She begins crying in a way that Martha immediately recognizes. Not the fussy cry of a sick child, but the strong, demanding cry of a baby who's feeling better. Martha quickly checks her forehead and realizes that Elizabeth's fever has broken. The willow bark tea has worked. This small miracle changes everything and gives Martha the confidence to proceed with their plan to help the Miller family. But as they set out on their journey through the cold morning air, none of them realize that they're about to face challenges that will test every skill, every resource, and every ounce of courage they possess. What do you think could go wrong during this journey to help a neighbor in need? How do you think colonial families manage to balance their own needs with their responsibilities to their community? 7 a.m. as the Henderson family sets out in their cart toward the Miller homestead. Martha Cool unshake the feeling that this day is going to test them in ways they have unexperienced before. The morning air is crisp and cold, but not dangerously so. Baby Elizabeth, thankfully, seems much better and is even showing interest in the sights and sounds around her. The road between their house and the Miller place is unreally a road at all. It's more like a path that's been worn down by repeated use over the years. In some places, tree roots create bumps and holes that make the cart bounce violently. In other spots, the path becomes narrow enough that Thomas has to guide the horse carefully to avoid getting caught in the dense underbrush on either side. As they travel, Martha explains to Mary what she might see when they reach the Miller house, preparing her daughter for the realities of colonial childbirth. In our modern world, we often shield children from these experiences, but in colonial times, children learned about life and death, birth and illness as natural parts of their education. When we get there, Mary, Mrs. Miller, might be in a lot of pain. Martha explains gently. That's normal when babies are being born, but it can be frightening to see if you're not used to it. Your job will be to help watch Elizabeth and to bring me whatever I need. Can you do that? Mary nods seriously. At 8 years old, she has already assisted her mother with various medical situations and understands that helping people sometimes requires seeing uncomfortable things. About halfway to the Miller place, they encounter their first major obstacle. The small creek that runs across their path is running much higher than usual, swollen by recent rains and snowmelt. Normally, the cart can cross easily through the shallow water. But today, the current looks stronger and the water level more dangerous. Thomas stops the cart and studies the situation carefully. In colonial times, getting stuck or overturning a cart could be more than just an inconvenience. It could be a life-threatening situation, especially when you're carrying a sick baby and trying to reach someone who needs urgent help. What do you think? Thomas asks Martha, trusting her judgment as much as his own. Martha looks at the swirling water, calculating risks. The water's not too deep, but that current could catch the cartwheels. If we go slow and keep to the right side, where it seems more shallow, Thomas nods and carefully guides the horse into the creek. The cartwheels find solid footing on the rocky bottom, and they make it across without incident. But the delay costs them precious time, and Martha knows that every minute could matter for Rebecca Miller. As they approach the Miller homestead, they can see smoke rising from the chimney, which is a good sign. It means Jonathan made it back safely, and someone is maintaining the fire. But they can also hear something that makes Martha S.'s heart race. The sound of a woman crying out in pain, audible even from outside the house. Thomas brings the cart to a stop near the front door, and Martha immediately begins organizing their arrival. Mary, you stay with Elizabeth and help your father unload our supplies. I need to go in and see what's happening right away. Martha hurries into the Miller house and immediately assesses the situation. Rebecca Miller is lying on a bed in the main room, surrounded by her 4 children who look frightened and uncertain. Jonathan is trying to comfort his wife while also managing the children, and it's clear that everyone is overwhelmed by the situation. Rebecca looks up when Martha enters, and the relief on her face is immediate. "Martha, thank God you came. Something's wrong. The baby won't come, and the pain is getting worse." Martha quickly washes her hands in a basin of hot water that Jonathan has prepared, then examines Rebecca carefully. What she discovers explains the problem immediately. The baby is positioned incorrectly for birth. What colonial midwives called a breech presentation. This doesn't necessarily mean disaster, but it does mean that Martha will need to use all her skill and experience to help both mother and baby safely through the birth. But as Martha prepares to help Rebecca, she realizes that the challenges are more complex than she initially thought. Rebecca is exhausted from hours of labor. The house is chaotic with frightened children. And Martha doesn't have all the supplies she normally would want for managing a difficult birth. This is the moment when Martha's years of experience in colonial life become essential. She knows that panicking or becoming overwhelmed won't help anyone. Instead, she needs to create order from chaos, prioritize the most important tasks, and work with whatever resources are available. "Jonathan," she says calmly, "I need you to take your children to your neighbors, the Prescotts, where they can be cared for while we handle this. Thomas can go with you and help explain the situation. Mary, I need you to stay here with me and Elizabeth to help with whatever comes up." But just as they begin to organize this plan, they hear the sound of another horse approaching rapidly. Martha looks out the window and sees Samuel returning from his mission. But his expression tells her that he doesn't bring good news. What do you think Samuel discovered at the Prescott place? Was Goodwife Adams able to come help? Or did the Henderson family discover that they were completely on their own for managing this dangerous situation? And here's something to think about. In our modern world, we rely on professionals, hospitals, and technology for medical emergencies. How do you think you would handle a situation where you had to rely entirely on your own knowledge, courage, and the help of your immediate family and neighbors? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement really helps this channel grow. And if you're finding these stories about colonial life interesting, please consider hitting that like button. 7:45 a.m. Samuel's news is exactly what Martha feared. Goodwife Adams is dealing with her own emergency. The Prescott's youngest child has taken a turn for the worse and is now struggling to breathe. She cannot leave, and there is no other experienced midwife within a day's ride. She said to tell you that you have all the knowledge you need, Samuel reports, and that she trusts your judgment completely. She also sent these. He pulls out a small cloth bag containing herbs that Martha immediately recognizes, ergot to help stop bleeding after birth, and shepherd's purse for the same purpose. This means Martha is completely responsible for managing Rebecca's difficult birth with only the help of her own family. In colonial times, this kind of situation was unfortunately common. People often had to handle medical emergencies with whatever knowledge and resources they could gather, relying on experience passed down through families and communities. This is not the time for doubt or fear. Rebecca and her baby are depending on her knowledge and skill. Thomas, I need you to help Jonathan get the other children settled somewhere safe. Mary, you'll need to be my assistant. Samuel, I need you to keep the fire going strong and have hot water ready whenever I ask for it. Rebecca's labor has been progressing for hours, but the baby's incorrect position means that normal delivery isn't happening. Martha knows several techniques for helping turn a baby during birth, but they're all risky and require precise timing and careful judgment. As Martha examines Rebecca again, she explains what she's going to try, both to prepare Rebecca for what's coming and to give herself confidence in her plan. Rebecca, the baby, is positioned backward, which is why this is taking so long. I'm going to try to help turn the baby, but you'll need to work with me and trust what I'm doing. Rebecca nods, exhausted but determined. In colonial times, women understood that childbirth was inherently dangerous, but they also developed incredible strength and endurance for dealing with these challenges. Martha begins the delicate process of trying to help the baby turn into the correct position. This requires not just medical knowledge, but also intuition, patience, and the ability to work with Rebecca's body rather than against it. Every movement must be gentle but purposeful. Every decision made with careful consideration of risks to both mother and child. Meanwhile, Mary proves herself to be an invaluable assistant. She keeps Elizabeth content and quiet, brings Martha whatever supplies she needs, and provides calm, steady support in a situation that would challenge even experienced adults. But as Martha works, she realizes that the situation is more complicated than she initially thought. Rebecca is showing signs of exhaustion that could become dangerous, and the baby's heart rate, which Martha checks by listening carefully with her ear against Rebecca's belly, seems to be slowing. This is the moment when colonial medical care required not just knowledge, but also courage and decision-making under extreme pressure. Martha has to choose between continuing to try to turn the baby, which might take more time than Rebecca has, or attempting to deliver the baby in its current position, which is riskier but might be faster. Martha makes her choice based on years of experience and her careful reading of Rebecca's condition. She decides to work with the baby's current position and help guide it through birth, rather than continuing to try to turn it. Rebecca, we're going to help this baby be born just as it is, Martha says confidently. It's going to require all your strength, and you'll need to follow my instructions exactly. But we can do this. What follows is one of the most intense and challenging hours that Martha has ever experienced. Helping a baby be born in breech position requires perfect timing, careful positioning, and constant attention to the safety of both mother and child. Mary watches in amazement as her mother demonstrates skills and knowledge that seem almost miraculous. Throughout the process, Martha maintains calm confidence, giving Rebecca clear instructions and encouragement while constantly monitoring the situation for any signs of danger. Samuel keeps the fire burning and the water hot, ready to assist however needed. Thomas and Jonathan return from settling the children, and both men wait anxiously outside, knowing that they can only help by staying out of the way and being ready for whatever might be needed. Finally, after what seems like hours, but is actually about 90 minutes, Martha's patience and skill are rewarded. Rebecca's baby is born safely, a healthy baby girl who immediately begins crying loudly, much to everyone's relief. But Martha's work isn't finished. In colonial times, the period immediately after birth could be just as dangerous as the birth itself. She needs to make sure that Rebecca is recovering properly, that the bleeding is normal, and that the baby is healthy and breathing well. As Martha cleans and examines the new baby, she's amazed once again by the resilience and strength that colonial life demanded and developed in people. Rebecca, despite hours of difficult labor, is already asking about her other children and wanting to make sure everyone is taken care of. The baby is perfect, a little girl with strong lungs and a healthy color. Martha wraps her in clean cloths and places her in Rebecca's arms, and the joy and relief in the room is overwhelming. But as the immediate crisis passes and everyone begins to relax, Martha realizes that this experience has changed something in her own daughter. Mary has witnessed something extraordinary. She's seen how knowledge, courage, and skill can literally save lives. What do you think this experience taught Mary about her own capabilities and about the responsibilities that colonial women carried? And how do you think witnessing this kind of emergency shaped children's understanding of life and their own roles in their communities? 9:30 a.m. As Martha finishes caring for Rebecca and the new baby, she notices that Mary has been unusually quiet throughout the intense experience. When Martha finally has a moment to sit beside her daughter, she realizes that 8-year-old Mary has been absorbing every detail of what happened, learning lessons that will stay with her for the rest of her life. "Mama," Mary says quietly, "how did you know what to do? How did you know the baby would be all right?" This question opens up one of the most important aspects of colonial life, the way knowledge and skills were passed down from generation to generation. Martha realizes that this morning has provided an unexpected opportunity to begin teaching. Mary about the responsibilities she'll one day carry as a woman in their community. I learned from watching my mother, just like you learned from watching me today, Martha explains. But more than that, I learned that sometimes you don't know if things will work out all right. You just have to do your best with what you know and trust that your knowledge and careful attention will be enough. This conversation reveals something beautiful about colonial education. Children didn't learn from books or formal classes, but from real-life experiences that prepared them for the actual challenges they would face as adults. Mary asks more questions about what she witnessed, and Martha patiently explains the medical reasoning behind her decisions, the risks involved, and the signs that told her whether things were going well or poorly. This is unjust casual conversation. It is the beginning of Mary's education in skills that could one day save lives in her own community. Meanwhile, Rebecca is recovering well, and her new daughter is nursing successfully. Both excellent signs that the crisis has passed safely. Thomas and Jonathan return with Rebecca's other children, who are amazed and delighted to meet their new sister. Now buzzes with quiet joy and relief, which had been filled with tension and fear, now buzzes with quiet joy and relief. But as Martha prepares to gather her family for the journey home, she faces a new dilemma. Rebecca is doing well, but she needs help for the next several days as she recovers from the difficult birth. Her husband, Jonathan, is capable, but he has his own work that can't be postponed. Crops to tend, animals to care for, and the constant tasks that keep a colonial farm running. In colonial communities, this kind of situation was handled through an informal network of mutual support. When someone needed help, neighbors provided it with the understanding that the assistance would be returned when needed. But this meant that Martha would need to either stay with Rebecca for several days or arrange for other women in the community to take turns helping. Martha, Rebecca says weakly, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved both our lives today." Martha waves off the thanks in the practical way that colonial people handled such situations. "We help each other," she says simply. "That's how we all survive out here." But Martha is already thinking ahead to the practical arrangements needed. Her own family needs her attention, especially with Elizabeth just recovering from her fever. Yet Rebecca genuinely needs continued care for at least the next few days. This is when colonial ingenuity and community cooperation really shine. Martha suggests a solution that addresses everyone's needs. What if Mary and I come back tomorrow morning to check on you and help with whatever you need most? And I'll send word to Sarah Whitman and Hannah Foster. They'll want to help too. And between all of us, we can make sure you have what you need while you recover. This arrangement demonstrates how colonial communities functioned as extended families. Everyone understood that survival depended on mutual support, and people willingly adjusted their own schedules and priorities to help neighbors through crises. As the Henderson family finally prepares to leave for home, Martha reflects on the morning's events. What started as a simple breakfast and routine daily chores had transformed into a life and death situation that tested every skill she possessed. But more than that, it had provided her daughter with an invaluable education in the realities of colonial life. Samuel, too, had shown remarkable maturity and responsibility throughout the crisis. His quick ride to seek help from Goodwife Adams, his steady assistance during the emergency, and his calm behavior under pressure all demonstrated that he was well on his way to becoming the kind of reliable, capable adult that colonial communities needed. The journey home gives the family time to process what they've experienced. Baby Elizabeth, completely recovered from her morning fever, sleeps peacefully in Martha's arms. Mary asks more questions about childbirth and medical care, showing a keen interest in learning skills that could someday make her valuable to her community. Thomas and Martha discuss the day's events quietly, both proud of how their children handled the emergency and grateful for the successful outcome. In colonial times, stories like this, where skill, courage, and community cooperation led to happy endings, were treasured and shared, providing both entertainment and important lessons for future challenges. But as they approach their own homestead, they realize that their day of challenges isn't over yet. The morning's emergency has put them hours behind their planned schedule, and all the regular daily tasks still need to be completed before nightfall. 11 a.m. When the Henderson family finally arrives back at their own home, they're faced with the reality that colonial life didn't pause for emergencies. All the work that normally would have been done during the morning hours still needs to be completed. Plus, they're now working with shortened daylight and energy depleted from the morning's intense experience. Martha quickly assesses the situation. The fire in their main room has burned low and needs attention. The chickens haven't been fed or let out of their coop. The family's midday meal needs to be prepared, and dozens of other small but essential tasks are waiting for attention. But here's where the morning's experience proves valuable in an unexpected way. The crisis at the Miller house has shown each family member that they were capable of handling much more responsibility and challenge than they might have thought. The confidence gained from successfully managing an emergency now helps them tackle their regular tasks with renewed energy and efficiency. "All right, everyone," Martha says with quiet authority. "We've proven we can handle whatever comes our way. Now, let's show these regular chores how it's done." Samuel immediately takes charge of building up the fire. Using skills he's practiced hundreds of times, but now performing with the confidence of someone who knows he can be counted on in serious situations. He arranges the wood carefully, adds kindling in just the right amounts, and soon has a strong fire burning that will serve the family's needs for cooking and warmth. Mary, inspired by her morning experience as her mother's assistant, takes on the chicken chores with new enthusiasm. She not only feeds the birds and collects eggs, but also takes time to check each chicken for signs of illness or injury. Applying the careful observation skills she learned watching her mother assess medical situations, Thomas heads out to check on their livestock and assess any damage from the morning's absence. In colonial times, animals were too valuable to leave unattended for long, and a few hours of neglect could sometimes lead to problems that took weeks to resolve. Martha, meanwhile, begins preparing the family's midday meal with Elizabeth playing contentedly nearby. The baby's complete recovery from her morning fever is a relief, but Martha continues to monitor her carefully throughout the day. As Martha works, she thinks about the remarkable morning they've all experienced. In just a few hours, her family has dealt with a medical emergency, traveled through difficult terrain, managed a life-and situation, and successfully helped bring a new life into the world. Now, they're calmly returning to their regular routines as if such adventures were perfectly normal. But that is exactly what made colonial families so resilient. They developed the ability to shift seamlessly between crisis and routine, handling whatever challenges arose while maintaining the steady rhythm of daily life that ensured survival. As Martha prepares a simple meal of leftover hasty pudding, dried meat, and preserved vegetables, she realizes that the morning's events have created something valuable beyond just helping the Miller family. Her children have gained confidence, experience, and knowledge that will serve them well throughout their lives. Mary now understands much more about medical care and emergency response. Samuel has proven to himself that he can handle serious responsibilities and make good decisions under pressure. Both children have seen their parents work together effectively as a team, providing them with a model for their own future relationships and responsibilities. But as the family sits down for their late morning meal, they're interrupted by yet another unexpected challenge. This time, the sound they hear isn't a galloping horse bringing news of emergency. Instead, it's something that every colonial family both welcomed and dreaded. The sound of multiple horses and voices approaching their homestead. This could mean visitors bringing news, traders offering goods, or officials bringing problems that could affect the entire community. Thomas looks out the window and counts at least 4 horses with riders. It's Magistrate Williams and some others I don't recognize, he reports. This looks official. In colonial times, visits from magistrates or other officials usually meant one of several things: tax collection, legal disputes that needed resolution, community decisions that required input from local families, or news of larger political or military developments that could affect everyone's safety and livelihood. Martha quickly covers their simple meal and makes sure the house is presentable for important visitors. Colonial hospitality demanded that guests be welcomed properly, regardless of how convenient their timing might be. As the magistrate and his companions approach the house, Martha and Thomas quickly discuss how to handle whatever situation might be developing. They've already proven today that they can manage unexpected challenges. But official visits often brought complications that could affect a family's long-term security and well-being. What do you think Magistrate Williams and his companions want to discuss with the Henderson family? And how do you think colonial families balanced their obligations to local authorities with their own family needs and priorities? 11:30 a.m. Magistrate Williams is a tall, stern man in his 50s who carries the authority of colonial government in their region. As he dismounts from his horse, Thomas and Martha both note that he is accompanied by 3 other men they do unrecognize, always a sign that whatever brings them here is more serious than routine business. Colonial protocol requires that Thomas, as head of household, greet the visitors and invite them inside, while Martha prepares refreshments and ensures the children behave appropriately. These social rules were on just politeness. They were essential for maintaining the respect and cooperation that colonial communities needed to function. "Good day, Magistrate Williams," Thomas says formally. "You're welcome in our home. Please, come inside where it's warm." The magistrate nods gravely. "Thank you, Thomas. I'm sorry to intrude on your day, but we have urgent business that affects every family in this region." Martha quickly serves cups of the chicory coffee she had prepared earlier, along with some of their precious maple sugar, offering the best hospitality possible, even when resources are limited, demonstrates respect for authority, and helps ensure that official business goes as smoothly as possible. The 3 strangers with Magistrate Williams introduce themselves as representatives from the Colonial Assembly in Boston. This immediately tells Thomas and Martha that whatever they rehear to discuss involves government policy that could significantly impact their lives. "We're here to inform you about new requirements that affect all colonial families," one of the Boston representatives begins. "The Crown has imposed additional taxes on landholdings, and we need to assess the current value and productivity of all farms in this region." This news hits Thomas and Martha like a physical blow. Additional taxes could mean the difference between a family's survival and financial ruin. Colonial families typically operated with very little margin for error. They grew or made almost everything they needed, traded surplus goods for essential items they couldn't produce themselves, and kept only minimal amounts of actual money. But the news gets worse. The second representative explains that the new taxes must be paid in gold or silver coins, not in the goods or services that colonial families usually used for trade and payment of obligations. How much time do we have to raise the money? Thomas asks, trying to keep his voice calm despite the growing concern he feels. The first payment is due before the end of harvest season. Magistrate Williams replies, about 4 months from now. Martha and Thomas exchange a look that communicates volumes. 4 months to raise money they don't have, in a form they rarely use, for taxes they weren't expecting. This is the kind of challenge that could force colonial families to sell land, livestock, or precious possessions just to avoid losing everything to tax collectors. But the officials aren't finished with their announcements. The third representative brings even more disturbing news. We also here to inform you that every able-bodied man between 16 and 50 must be prepared for military service. There are reports of French and Indian raiders moving closer to colonial settlements, and the colonial defense forces need to be expanded immediately. This means that Samuel, though only 12 now, will be expected to serve in the colonial militia as soon as he reaches 16. And Thomas, at 36, could be called away from his family at any time to help defend the region against attacks. The implications of this announcement are staggering. If Thomas is called to military service, Martha would be left to manage the farm, care for the children, and somehow still raise money for the new taxes, all while dealing with a constant threat of raids on isolated homesteads. Colonial women were certainly capable of managing these challenges, but the physical and emotional strain would be enormous. Martha thinks of Rebecca Miller just hours after giving birth, and imagines having to handle such responsibilities while also managing emergency medical situations for the community. But even as these overwhelming challenges sink in, Martha and Thomas demonstrate the resilience that made colonial survival possible. Instead of panicking or becoming paralyzed by the enormity of their problems, they immediately begin thinking practically about solutions. What options do families have for raising the tax money? Martha asks, are there government programs for purchasing surplus crops or opportunities for additional work that could provide the coins needed? The magistrate explains that the colonial government is encouraging families to increase production of cash crops like tobacco or indigo, which can be sold for actual money rather than traded for other goods. They also establishing new markets for colonial-made goods that might appeal to buyers in larger towns and cities. This information gives Thomas and Martha the beginning of a plan. They already grow some tobacco, but they could expand those fields. Martha is skilled at making candles, soap, and other household goods that might have value in cash markets. Samuel is old enough to help with increased production, and Mary could take on additional household responsibilities to free up time for income-generating activities. The officials finish their business and prepare to continue their visits to other families in the region. As they mount their horses and ride away, Thomas and Martha are left to absorb the full impact of the changes that will reshape their lives over the coming months. But as they sit together, processing this information, they realize that the morning-s experience at the Miller house has actually prepared them for this new challenge. They've proven to themselves and their children that they can handle unexpected crises, work together effectively under pressure, and find creative solutions to complex problems. "We've managed everything else," Martha says quietly. "We'll manage this too." This statement captures the essential spirit of colonial life. The quiet confidence that comes from repeatedly overcoming challenges through hard work, mutual support, and creative problem solving. But as Thomas and Martha begin planning how to address their new circumstances, they're interrupted by yet another surprise. What do you think could happen next in this already eventful day? And how do you think colonial families maintained their emotional resilience when facing one challenge after another? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if these stories about colonial life are holding your interest, please give this video a like. There's so much more to discover about how our ancestors adapted to constantly changing circumstances with courage, creativity, and determination. 12:15 p.m. The surprise that interrupts Thomas and Martha's planning session is another crisis. It is actually the sound of hope approaching. They hear multiple voices and the sound of several people walking toward their house. And when Thomas looks outside, he sees something that perfectly demonstrates the power of colonial community support. Approaching their house are Jonathan Miller, despite having just become a father that morning, along with 3 other neighbors, Samuel Whitman, Robert Foster, and elderly William Prescott. These men represent 4 different families, but they all coming together for the same purpose: to discuss how their community will respond to the new tax and military requirements. In colonial times, individual families rarely faced major challenges alone. Instead, communities developed informal but effective networks for sharing information, pooling resources, and creating mutual support systems that helped everyone survive difficulties that might overwhelm any single family. Jonathan Miller speaks first, his voice still showing the emotional strain of the morning's events, but also demonstrating the resilience that colonial life demanded. "Martha, Thomas, I can't thank you enough for what you did this morning. But right now, we all need to talk about what Magistrate Williams told us." It quickly becomes clear that the officials have visited every family in their area with the same announcements about new taxes and military obligations. Each family is facing the same overwhelming challenges, But by coming together, they can begin developing strategies that might work for everyone. Samuel Whitman, whose farm borders the Henderson property, suggests that the families coordinate their crop planning to maximize their collective ability to raise tax money. If we each focus on different cash crops, instead of all trying to grow the same things, we can avoid competing with each other for buyers and maybe get better prices. This kind of cooperative planning was common in colonial communities. Rather than viewing neighbors as competitors, successful colonial families understood that everyone's prosperity depended on the success of the entire community. Robert Foster, who has the largest family in their area with 7 children, brings up the military service issue. If they call up all the men for service at the same time, our families won't be able to manage the farms and raise the tax money. We need to volunteer for different periods so that some men are always available to help the families whose husbands are away. This conversation reveals something remarkable about colonial communities: their ability to turn individual problems into collective solutions. Instead of each family struggling alone with impossible challenges, these neighbors are creating a network of mutual support that makes the challenges manageable. William Prescott, the eldest of the group, at nearly 60 years old, shares wisdom gained from previous experiences with colonial taxes and military demands. 20 years ago, we faced similar problems when the Crown needed money for the war with Spain. The families that survived were the ones that worked together and helped each other through the difficult times. Martha realizes that this community meeting is providing her family with something invaluable: practical strategies for dealing with their new challenges, plus the emotional support that comes from knowing they're not facing these problems alone. Mary and Samuel listen intently to the adult conversation, learning lessons about cooperation, planning, and mutual support that will serve them throughout their lives. Colonial children didn't just learn practical skills from their families. They also learned the social skills necessary for building and maintaining the community relationships that made survival possible. As the discussion continues, the group develops a comprehensive plan for helping all their families meet the new requirements. They'll coordinate their crop planning, share labor and resources during peak work periods, take turns providing military service, and create systems for supporting families whose breadwinners are called away for defense duties. But the most important outcome of this meeting is on the specific plans they develop. It is the renewed sense of community solidarity that emerges from facing challenges together. Each family leaves the meeting knowing that they have allies, resources, and support systems that they can count on during the difficult months ahead. After the neighbors leave, Thomas and Martha sit down with their children to explain how the day's events will affect their family's future. This conversation demonstrates another important aspect of colonial life: the way parents prepared children for adult responsibilities by including them in family decision-making and planning. Samuel, Thomas begins. You've proven today that you can handle serious responsibilities. Over the next few months, we're going to need your help more than ever. Are you ready for that? Samuel nods seriously, understanding that he's being asked to take on adult responsibilities earlier than he might have expected, but also feeling proud that his parents trust him with important roles in the family's survival. Martha turns to Mary with similar seriousness. Mary, you showed this morning that you can be counted on when things get difficult. We'll need you to help with many things while Samuel and your father work on expanding our cash crops. Can you do that? Mary's response shows the remarkable maturity that colonial life developed in children. Yes, Mama, I want to help our family, and I want to learn everything you can teach me. These conversations reveal how colonial families transformed challenges into opportunities for growth, education, and stronger family bonds. Instead of sheltering children from difficulties, parents used challenging circumstances to teach resilience, responsibility, and the importance of family cooperation. As the afternoon progresses, the Henderson family begins implementing their new plans. But as they work together on their expanded goals, they discover that the day's challenges aren't quite finished with them yet. 1:30 p.m. Just as the Henderson family settles into their new plans and begins organizing their response to the morning's official announcements, they face yet another test of their adaptability and resilience. This time, the challenge comes from an unexpected source: the weather. Martha, who has learned to read natural signs as carefully as written words, notices that the wind has shifted direction and picked up speed. The clouds that had been light and scattered during the morning are now building into darker, heavier formations. Most concerning of all, the air has taken on that distinctive feel that colonial people learned to recognize as a warning of severe weather approaching. In our modern world, we rely on weather forecasts, warnings, and emergency broadcasts to prepare for storms. Colonial families had to read the signs themselves and make critical decisions based on their own observations and experience. Thomas, Martha says quietly, not wanting to alarm the children unnecessarily, look at those clouds building in the west and feel how the wind has changed. Thomas immediately understands what Martha is observing. The weather signs indicate that a serious storm could be approaching, the kind that could damage crops, threaten livestock, and create dangerous conditions for anyone caught outside. This presents the family with a complex set of decisions. Should they focus on securing their own property and animals, or should they first check on the Miller family, where Rebecca is still recovering from childbirth and might need help preparing for severe weather? Should they send messages to their neighbors warning about the approaching storm, or assume that other families are making their own observations and preparations? Colonial families couldn't rely on emergency services or government assistance during severe weather. Each family was responsible for their own preparations and for helping neighbors who might need assistance. This required quick decision-making and the ability to prioritize multiple urgent tasks simultaneously. Thomas makes the first decision. Samuel, I need you to help me secure all the animals and bring in anything that could blow away. Mary, help your mother gather emergency supplies and prepare for the possibility that we might lose power if the wind gets strong enough to bring down trees. But Martha has a different concern. What about Rebecca and her new baby? Jonathan will be busy securing his own property, and Rebecca can't help with storm preparations. She might not even realize how serious this weather could become. This dilemma perfectly illustrates the constant tension in colonial life between family obligations and community responsibilities. Thomas and Martha make their decision quickly, demonstrating the kind of rapid problem-solving that colonial life demanded. Mary, you and Elizabeth stay here and begin gathering emergency supplies: food, water, candles, extra blankets. Samuel, come with your mother and me. We'll ride quickly to the Miller place. Make sure they're prepared for the storm. Then come back and finish our own preparations. This solution addresses both needs, but it also creates new risks. Traveling during approaching severe weather is dangerous, and dividing the family means that each group has fewer resources for handling problems that might develop. But as they prepare for this emergency trip to check on the Miller family, the Henderson family demonstrates the confidence and efficiency they've developed through the day's previous challenges. Each person knows their role, understands the risks, and is prepared to work together for the safety of everyone involved. Martha quickly packs supplies that Rebecca might need during a storm: extra candles, dried food that doesn't require cooking, herbs for medical emergencies, and warm blankets for the new baby. Samuel helps Thomas harness their horse to the cart, working with the speed and precision that comes from years of practice. Mary, though only 8 years old, takes charge of preparing the house for the family's temporary absence and organizing emergency supplies in case the storm proves more severe than expected. Her calm competence in this situation shows how much she's learned and grown just during this single eventful day. But as they prepare to leave for the Miller homestead, the weather signs become even more ominous. The wind is now strong enough to bend tree branches, and the first fat raindrops are beginning to fall. Thomas realizes that they might be cutting their timing very close. If this storm hits while we're traveling, we could be in serious trouble, he tells Martha. But if we don't check on Rebecca and she needs help, Martha makes the decision with characteristic colonial directness. We go fast. We make sure they're safe, and we get back here as quickly as possible. We've handled everything else today. We can handle this too. As the Henderson family sets out into the approaching storm, they're demonstrating the kind of courage and community commitment that made Colonial survival possible. They're risking their own safety to ensure that neighbors are protected, trusting in their own skills and preparation to see them through whatever challenges the weather might bring. But as they race toward the Miller homestead, with storm clouds gathering overhead and wind whipping around their cart, they have no way of knowing that this weather emergency will test their resourcefulness and cooperation in ways that even the morning medical crisis could unmatch. What do you think the Henderson family will find when they reach the Miller house? And how do you think Colonial families managed to balance their own safety needs with their obligations to help neighbors during emergencies? 2 p.m. The Henderson family arrives at the Miller homestead just as the first serious wind gusts begin to shake the trees around them. What they find there reveals both the challenges and the remarkable resilience of Colonial community life. Jonathan Miller is indeed struggling to handle storm preparations while also caring for his wife and new baby. He's managed to secure most of his animals, but his roof has developed a leak that he discovered only when the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Rebecca, still weak from the morning's difficult birth, is trying to help by gathering supplies, but she's clearly not strong enough for the physical demands of storm preparation. The sight of the Henderson family arriving brings visible relief to Jonathan's face. "Thank God you came," he says, over the increasing wind. "The roof is leaking right over Rebecca's bed, and I can't fix it and take care of everything else at the same time." This situation perfectly demonstrates why Colonial communities developed such strong mutual support systems. Individual families, no matter how capable, sometimes faced challenges that required more resources or manpower than they could provide alone. Thomas immediately assesses the roof problem and realizes it can be fixed, but only if someone climbs up to secure loose shingles, while another person works from inside to direct the repairs. This is dangerous work under normal conditions, but with strong winds and increasing rain, it becomes genuinely hazardous. Meanwhile, Martha takes charge of the indoor preparations, working with Rebecca to move the baby's cradle away from the leak and organize supplies in case the storm proves to be long-lasting. Samuel helps Jonathan finish securing the animals and bringing in anything that could blow away in high winds. But as they work, the weather deteriorates faster than anyone expected. What had seemed like a typical spring storm is developing into something more serious, the kind of severe weather that Colonial families both dreaded and respected. The wind is now strong enough to make climbing on the roof genuinely dangerous, but the leak is getting worse and threatens to soak Rebecca's bedding and create dangerous conditions for a new mother and baby. Thomas has to make a quick decision about whether the roof repair is worth the risk. "I can do it if you spot me from below," Thomas tells Jonathan. "But we need to work fast before the wind gets any stronger." This kind of risk calculation was a constant part of colonial life. Families regularly had to weigh immediate dangers against long-term consequences, making decisions that could affect their safety and survival with limited information and no outside help. As Thomas climbs carefully onto the wet, windy roof, Martha organizes the indoor emergency preparations with characteristic efficiency. She helps Rebecca move to a safer part of the house, makes sure the fire is burning strongly enough to provide warmth if they lose other heat sources, and prepare supplies of food and water that don't require cooking. Samuel proves invaluable during this emergency, demonstrating the maturity and capability that the day's challenges have developed in him. He helps Jonathan secure loose items around the property, assists Martha with indoor preparations, and keeps watch on the weather conditions to warn the adults if the situation becomes too dangerous to continue outdoor work. The roof repair is successful, but just barely. Thomas manages to secure the loose shingles and stop the leak. But by the time he climbs down, the wind is strong enough that continuing to work outside would be genuinely reckless. As the two families gather inside the Miller house to wait out the worst of the storm, they create an impromptu community that demonstrates the social dynamics that made colonial survival possible. Rather than viewing the storm as a disaster, they treat it as an opportunity for cooperation, mutual support, and strengthening the relationships that their entire community depends on. Rebecca, despite her weakness from childbirth, insists on contributing to the group effort by sharing her knowledge of weather patterns and storm safety. Jonathan provides information about local conditions that might affect how long the storm lasts. Martha and Thomas share their own experience and resources to help ensure everyone's safety. But perhaps most importantly is the children. Samuel and the Miller children learn valuable lessons about cooperation, resource management, and the importance of helping others during emergencies. These lessons will stay with them throughout their lives and help them become the kind of adults who can maintain strong, supportive communities. As the storm reaches its peak intensity outside, the combined families inside create a small island of warmth, safety, and mutual support. They share food, tell stories to keep the children calm, and work together to monitor the weather and maintain their preparations. But storms in colonial times were unpredictable, and just as the group begins to feel confident that they're weathering the emergency successfully, they hear a sound that changes everything: the unmistakable crack and crash of a large tree falling very close to the house. What damage do you think the fallen tree might have caused? And how do you think colonial families handled property damage during emergencies when professional help wasn't available. The story continues to unfold, showing us how our ancestors faced one challenge after another with remarkable resilience, creativity, and mutual support. 3 p.m. The sound of the falling tree is followed by an ominous silence. Through the small windows, the combined families can see that a large oak tree has fallen across the path between the house and the barn, and one of its major branches has damaged the roof of Jonathan's workshop. In our modern world, this would mean calling insurance companies, contractors, and emergency services. In colonial times, it meant that the families themselves would need to assess the damage, determine what could be salvaged, and figure out how to make repairs with whatever materials and tools they had available. Thomas and Jonathan carefully venture outside during a brief lull in the wind to examine the situation. What they find is both better and worse than they feared. The tree hasn't caused structural damage to the main house, but it has completely blocked access to the barn where the animals are sheltered. And it has crushed Jonathan's workshop where he keeps many of his essential tools. The animals seem safe in the barn, Jonathan reports when they return inside, but we can't get to them until we move that tree and my workshop. He trails off, and Martha can see the concern in his eyes. The workshop damage represents a serious, long-term problem for the Miller family. Colonial craftsmen like Jonathan invested years in acquiring and maintaining their tools, and losing them could affect the family's ability to earn income and maintain their property. But the immediate problem is simpler. They need to move enough of the tree to reach the animals and ensure they have food and water. This situation demonstrates another essential aspect of colonial life: the ability to prioritize problems and tackle them in logical order. The families can't solve everything at once, but they can identify the most urgent issues and address them systematically. Martha takes charge of organizing the indoor situation, while Thomas and Samuel work with Jonathan to develop a plan for dealing with the tree. Rebecca, despite her recent childbirth, insists on helping by keeping watch on the weather and monitoring the children. The wind is definitely decreasing, Rebecca observes from her position near the window. I think the worst of the storm is passing, but we'll probably have steady rain for several more hours. This weather assessment is crucial for planning the tree removal work. Colonial families became expert at reading weather signs because their survival often depended on accurate predictions of when it was safe to work outside and when conditions were too dangerous. Thomas and Jonathan develop a strategy for moving the fallen tree that demonstrates colonial problem solving at its best. They can't move the entire tree. It's far too heavy and large for that. But they can cut away enough branches to clear a path to the barn and salvage useful lumber from the parts that are unneeded for clearing the path. Samuel volunteers to help with this work, and his offer raises an important question about colonial childhood. At 12 years old, Samuel is certainly old enough to help with heavy physical labor. But tree removal during a storm involves real dangers that could result in serious injury. Thomas makes his decision based on his assessment of Samuel's maturity and capability demonstrated throughout this eventful day. You can help, but only with the tasks I assign you, and only when I'm working right beside you. This isn't regular work, it's emergency work, and that means extra caution. This conversation reveals how colonial parents balanced giving children real responsibilities with protecting them from unnecessary risks. Samuel gets to participate in important family and community work, but with clear limits and constant supervision. As the three males work outside in the decreasing wind and steady rain, Martha and Rebecca work together inside to organize supplies and plan for the family's needs over the next several hours. This cooperation between two women, one experienced and one recovering from childbirth, demonstrates the flexibility and mutual support that colonial communities depended on. The tree removal work proves to be both challenging and educational. The men discover that Jonathan's workshop, while damaged, hasn't lost all its contents. Many of his most important tools are salvageable, though they'll need cleaning and possibly repairs. This is much better news than they had feared. More importantly, they were able to clear a path to the barn and confirm that all the animals weathered the storm safely. This means that the Miller family has unlost any of their essential livestock, a relief that would be hard to overstate in colonial terms. But as they work, Thomas notices something that will affect both families' plans for the coming weeks. The fallen tree, while creating immediate problems, has also provided them with a substantial amount of useful lumber. Exactly the kind of resource they'll need for expanding their cash crop operations to meet the new tax requirements. Jonathan, Thomas says, as they take a brief rest from their work, "This lumber could be exactly what we need for building additional storage buildings for our expanded crops. Sometimes problems bring their own solutions." This observation demonstrates the colonial mindset that looked for opportunities within challenges. Instead of viewing the storm damage as purely negative, Thomas sees how it might actually provide resources that will help both families address their long-term financial challenges. As the afternoon progresses and the immediate storm crisis passes, both families begin to see how the day, as various challenges have actually strengthened their relationship and improved their ability to work together. The medical emergency, the official announcements, and the storm damage have all required cooperation, resource sharing, and mutual support. But the day isn't finished with them yet, as they complete the essential storm cleanup and prepare for the Henderson family's return home. They receive news that will test their community bonds in yet another way. What do you think this new challenge might be? And how do you think colonial communities maintained their spirit of cooperation when faced with one difficulty after another. 4:30 p.m. As Thomas, Jonathan, and Samuel finish clearing the essential pathway through the fallen tree, they make a discovery that transforms their understanding of the day's events. While moving one of the larger branches, Samuel notices something unusual embedded in the damaged wood of Jonathan's workshop wall. "Father, look at this," Samuel calls, pointing to what appears to be a metal object partially hidden in the splintered wood. When Thomas and Jonathan investigate more closely, they realize that Samuel has discovered something remarkable. A small metal box that had been hidden in the wall of Jonathan's workshop, probably placed there years ago, and forgotten until the storm damage revealed it. The box is made of sturdy iron and shows signs of having been deliberately concealed. This kind of hidden storage was not uncommon in colonial times, when families often needed to protect valuable items from theft, damage, or confiscation during political troubles. But the question immediately arises: does this box belong to Jonathan, or was it hidden by whoever owned the property before him? And, more importantly, what might be inside that could affect the current situation? Jonathan examines the box carefully, trying to remember anything his predecessor might have told him about hidden items on the property. The Miller family had purchased their land from an elderly widower named Ezra Thompson, who had moved to live with relatives in a larger town about 3 years ago. Ezra mentioned something about leaving a few things behind for whoever came after him, Jonathan recalls, slowly. But I thought he meant tools or farm equipment. I never imagined he meant something like this. The discovery raises immediate practical and ethical questions that colonial communities had to navigate carefully. Does the box legally belong to Jonathan as the current property owner, or should it be returned to Ezra Thompson, if possible? And what if the contents are valuable enough to help with the tax problems that both families are facing? Thomas suggests a solution that demonstrates colonial values about honesty and community responsibility. We should open it together to see what's inside. But if it contains anything of real value, we should make an effort to contact Ezra Thompson and let him know what we found. This approach balances curiosity and practical needs with ethical obligations, a kind of moral reasoning that colonial communities relied on when formal legal systems were unavailable to resolve disputes. The box is secured with a simple but sturdy lock that shows signs of age and weather exposure. Jonathan retrieves some tools from the salvageable part of his workshop, and after several minutes of careful work, they manage to open the container without damaging its contents. What they find inside takes their breath away. The box contains a collection of items that tell a story of colonial life spanning several decades. There are handwritten documents, including what appears to be a deed to additional land that Ezra Thompson owned but never mentioned to Jonathan. There's a small leather pouch containing silver coins. Not a fortune, but more money than either family has seen in one place for years. And most intriguingly, there are detailed notes about successful farming techniques, including methods for growing cash crops that could be exactly what both families need to meet their new tax obligations. But perhaps most valuable of all, there's a letter addressed to whoever finds this box in Ezra Thompson's careful handwriting. Jonathan reads the letter aloud to Thomas and Samuel. If you are reading this, it means that time or circumstance has revealed what I hoped would remain hidden until it was needed. The contents of this box represent the savings and knowledge I accumulated over 40 years of farming this land. I leave them for whoever works this property after me, with the hope that they will be used wisely and shared generously with neighbors in times of need. The land deed describes 20 acres of good farmland that I never registered with the colonial authorities. It can be claimed by whoever finds this letter. The coins should be used for emergencies or opportunities that could benefit the entire community. The farming notes contain everything I learned about growing crops for profit. Use these gifts well, and remember that we all depend on each other for survival in this challenging land. This discovery transforms the entire situation for both families. The additional land could provide space for expanded cash crop production. The coins could help with immediate tax payments, and Ezra's farming knowledge could make the difference between success and failure in their efforts to meet the colonial government's new requirements. But the letter also creates new responsibilities. Ezra Thompson specifically requested that these resources be shared generously with neighbors, a request that reflects colonial values about community, cooperation, and mutual support. As Thomas and Jonathan absorb the implications of this discovery, they realize that the storm damage that seemed like a disaster has actually revealed resources that could help their entire community survive the challenges imposed by the new taxes and military obligations. Samuel, meanwhile, is experiencing his own revelation. The discovery of the hidden box, coming at the end of a day filled with medical emergencies, official announcements, and storm damage, has shown him that colonial life is full of unexpected turns that require adaptability, courage, and wisdom. It's like the day has been testing us. Samuel observes with 12-year-old insight, and every time we handled one challenge, another opportunity appeared. This observation captures something profound about colonial life. The way that challenges and opportunities were often intertwined, and the way that families who responded to difficulties with courage and cooperation often found themselves better positioned to take advantage of new possibilities. As the three returned to the house to share their discovery with Martha and Rebecca, they're carrying not just a metal box and its contents, but also a renewed sense of hope and possibility for addressing their family's future challenges. 5 p.m. When Martha and Rebecca learn about the contents of Ezra Thompson's hidden box. Their reactions demonstrate the practical wisdom that colonial women brought to family and community decision-making. Instead of focusing primarily on the immediate excitement of the discovery, they immediately begin considering how these new resources can be used most effectively to address the challenges facing their entire community. 20 acres of additional farmland could make all the difference for growing cash crops, Martha observes, but only if we can organize the labor to work it properly. And these silver coins, while helpful, won't solve everyone's tax problems by themselves. Rebecca, despite her recent childbirth and the day's various emergencies, demonstrates remarkable clarity in analyzing their situation. What we really have here is the seed of a solution that could help several families, but only if we approach it as a community project rather than just thinking about our own individual needs. This conversation reveals one of the most important aspects of colonial survival: the ability to think beyond immediate family interests and consider how individual good fortune could benefit the entire community. Colonial families understood that their long-term security depended on the prosperity and stability of their neighbors. Thomas and Jonathan quickly agree with this community-focused approach. They decide to invite the same neighbors who had met earlier to discuss the tax and military challenges to return that evening to learn about the discovery and help plan how to use these new resources most effectively. As they prepare for this community meeting, Martha realizes that the day's events have transformed their understanding of their own capabilities and their relationships with their neighbors. What had started as a simple morning routine had evolved into a series of challenges that tested and strengthened both family bonds and community connections. Samuel, Martha says to her son, "I want you to think about everything that happened today and what you've learned from it. This is the kind of day that changes how you see yourself and your responsibilities to others." Samuel considers this request seriously, demonstrating the maturity that the day's experiences have developed in him. "I learned that I can handle much more responsibility than I thought I could," he replies. "But I also learned that the most important thing is working together with other people. Nothing we accomplish today could have been done by just one person alone." This insight captures one of the fundamental lessons of colonial life: that individual capability was essential, but community cooperation was what made survival and prosperity possible. Mary, who has been listening intently to the adult conversations throughout the day, adds her own observation. "I learned that being helpful means paying attention to what people need and being ready to do whatever is necessary, even if it's scary or difficult." These children's reflections show how colonial life provided constant opportunities for learning practical skills, moral reasoning, and social responsibility. The challenges that might seem overwhelming to modern families became educational experiences that prepared colonial children for adult responsibilities. As evening approaches and the other families begin arriving for the community meeting, the Henderson and Miller households demonstrate the hospitality and cooperation that made colonial communities work. Despite the day's various challenges, they prepare to share food, resources, and decision-making with their neighbors. The meeting that follows involves all the families who had gathered earlier, plus additional neighbors who have heard about the day's events and want to contribute to the community planning process. What emerges is a comprehensive strategy for using Ezra Thompson's resources to benefit everyone while addressing the tax and military challenges that threaten their entire region. Samuel Whitman suggests that the additional farmland be worked cooperatively, with different families taking responsibility for different crops and sharing both the labor and the profits. Robert Foster proposes that the silver coins be used as seed money for purchasing supplies and equipment that can be shared among all the families. William Prescott, drawing on his decades of experience with colonial challenges, recommends that they send a representative to contact Ezra Thompson and inform him of the discovery, both out of honesty and because he might have additional knowledge or resources that could help their community efforts. But perhaps most importantly, the meeting demonstrates how colonial communities transformed individual challenges into collective opportunities. Instead of each family struggling alone with impossible requirements, they're creating a network of mutual support that makes the challenges manageable and even promising. As the meeting progresses into the evening, Martha reflects on the remarkable transformation that a single day has brought to their lives. What had begun with a simple breakfast and routine chores had evolved into a series of experiences that strengthened family relationships, deepened community bonds, and opened up new possibilities for the future. But the day isn't quite finished yet. As the community meeting concludes and families prepare to return to their own homes, they receive one final surprise that will provide the perfect ending to this extraordinary day. What do you think this final surprise might be? And how do you think the events of this single day will influence the Henderson family as future and their relationships with their community? 7 p.m. As the community meeting winds down and neighbors begin preparing for their journeys home, the final surprise of this remarkable day arrives in the form of a rider approaching through the evening twilight. But unlike the morning's urgent arrival of Jonathan Miller, this rider brings news that fills everyone with relief and joy. The rider is young Peter Whitman, Samuel Whitman's eldest son, returning from a trading trip to Boston with news that will affect everyone as planning for the new tax requirements. His timing could be better. Arriving. Just as the community has finished developing their cooperative strategy for addressing their challenges, the Colonial Assembly has announced new opportunities for families who can increase their production of certain crops, Peter reports breathlessly. They're offering guaranteed purchase agreements and premium prices for tobacco, indigo, and flax. The Crown needs these materials for trade with other nations, and they're willing to pay well for them. This news transforms the community's understanding of their situation. What had seemed like an impossible burden, raising money to pay new taxes, now appears to be an opportunity for genuine prosperity if they can organize their production effectively. But Peter has even better news. They're also offering tools, seeds, and technical assistance to communities that can demonstrate cooperative planning and mutual support. Our community meeting tonight shows exactly the kind of organization they want to encourage. Martha and Thomas exchange a look of amazement. The cooperative planning that their community developed naturally, based on colonial values of mutual support and shared responsibility, turns out to be exactly what the colonial government wants to promote and reward. As the implications of this news sink in, the families realize that the day's challenges have actually positioned these new opportunities. The additional land from Ezra Thompson's box, the community cooperation they've developed, and the skills and resources they've discovered in themselves give them everything they need to create genuine prosperity while meeting their tax obligations. Samuel Whitman immediately proposes that their community apply for the government assistance program, using their cooperative land use plan as the foundation for their application. The other families quickly agree, recognizing that this opportunity could transform their economic situation while strengthening their community bonds. As the meeting finally concludes and families begin their journeys home, Martha gathers her own family for the trip back to their house. The cart ride gives them time to reflect on the extraordinary day they've experienced together. It's hard to believe that this morning we were just having breakfast and worrying about Elizabeth's fever. Thomas observes, now we re-part of a community project that could change all our lives for the better. Martha nods. But her thoughts go deeper than just the practical outcomes. What amazes me is how every challenge we face today led to something better. Helping Rebecca brought our community together. The official announcements forced us to think creatively about cooperation. The storm revealed Ezra's hidden resources. Each problem became the foundation for a solution. Samuel, tired but exhilarated by the day's adventures, adds his own reflection. I feel like I grew up today, not just because I helped with adult work, but because I learned that I can handle whatever comes along if I work with other people and do give up. Mary, sleepy but content in her mother's arms, alongside baby Elizabeth, murmurs her own insight. Today was scary sometimes, but it was also the most interesting day I can remember. I learned so much about helping people and solving problems. As they arrive at their own house, the Henderson family faces the pleasant task of settling in for the evening after their extraordinary day. The fire that Martha had built so carefully that morning is still burning, providing warmth and light for their return. The simple routines of evening care, preparing a light supper, checking on the animals, banking the fire for the night, feel both familiar and somehow different after the day's adventures. Thomas and Martha take a few minutes alone to discuss how the day's events will affect their family's future. The opportunities that have opened up will require hard work, careful planning, and continued cooperation with their neighbors, but they also offer the possibility of genuine prosperity and security. We'll need to expand our crop production significantly, Thomas observes. That means more work for everyone, including the children. Are we ready for that level of commitment? Martha considers this question carefully. Colonial families couldn't make major commitments lightly. Once they committed to expanded production, their survival would depend on following through successfully. After today, I think we're ready for anything, she replies. The children have shown they can handle real responsibilities. Our community relationships are stronger than ever, and we've proven we can work together to solve whatever problems arise. As the family settles in for sleep, each member reflects on their own experiences and lessons from the day. Bedtime often provided the only quiet time for processing the day's events and preparing mentally for whatever tomorrow might bring. 8:30 p.m. As the Henderson family settles into their evening routine, the quiet activities of ending the day provide a gentle contrast to the intense challenges they've VA'd since dawn. Martha nurses baby Elizabeth by the firelight, while Mary helps organize the next day's necessities, and Samuel assists Thomas with securing the house for the night. But these simple activities carry deeper meaning after the day's extraordinary experiences. Each family member has been changed by what they've encountered, learned, and accomplished, and their quiet evening conversations reflect their new understanding of their own capabilities and their relationships with their community. "Mama," Mary asks softly as she helps prepare Elizabeth's bedding, "will we really be able to help grow enough crops to pay the new taxes and help the other families too?" Martha considers her daughter's question carefully, wanting to give an honest answer that neither creates false hope nor unnecessary worry. "We'll work as hard as we can, and we'll work together with our neighbors," she replies. "That's all anyone can do, but it's usually enough if people don't give up." This conversation reveals how colonial parents balanced honesty about life as challenges with confidence in their family's abilities to meet those challenges. Children learned early that life was difficult and uncertain, but they also learned that hard work, cooperation, and perseverance usually led to successful outcomes. Samuel, meanwhile, is processing his own transformation from the day's experiences. At 12 years old, he's crossed some invisible threshold from childhood toward adult responsibility. And he is beginning to understand the weight and satisfaction that comes with being counted on by his family and community. Father, Samuel says, as they checked the animals one final time. When the men were talking about military service today, I realized that in just 4 years, I might be called to serve, too. Does that frighten you? Thomas appreciates his son's directness and responds with equal honesty. It concerns me because military service is dangerous and I want you to be safe. But it doesn't frighten me because I've seen today that you have the courage, judgment, and sense of responsibility that would make you a good soldier if that becomes necessary. This kind of conversation was common in colonial families, where children needed to prepare for adult responsibilities that might include genuine dangers. Parents provided emotional support while also building confidence and practical skills. As the family gathers around their fireplace for a few minutes before sleep, Thomas leads them in their evening prayers. Not just the routine expressions of gratitude that ended most colonial days, but heartfelt thanks for the specific experiences and outcomes they've shared. We thank God for helping us through this day's challenges. Thomas prays for the safe birth of Rebecca Miller's baby, for the storm that revealed Ezra Thompson's gifts, for the neighbors who work with us, and for the opportunities that have opened up for our community. But he also includes prayers for wisdom and strength for the challenges ahead. Help us to work hard and work together, to make good decisions when problems arise, and to remember that we depend on each other for everything we need. These prayers reflect the colonial understanding that survival and prosperity required both human effort and divine assistance, and that gratitude and humility were essential for maintaining the relationships, both human and spiritual. That made life possible. As the family prepares for sleep, Martha takes a moment to record the day's events in her journal, a simple notebook where she keeps track of important family and community happenings. Colonial record-keeping served practical purposes, but it also provided a way to process significant experiences and preserve family history. Her entry for this day captures both the specific events and their larger meaning. April 15th, 1740, Elizabeth recovered from fever, helped birth Rebecca Miller's daughter. Healthy girl, mother well. Storm damaged Miller workshop, but revealed Ezra Thompson's hidden box with land deed, silver coins, and farming notes. Community meeting planned cooperative response to new taxes. Peter Whitman brought news of government assistance for crop production. Children showed great maturity and helpfulness. Thomas and neighbors worked well together. Grateful for this day's challenges and blessings. This brief summary doesn't capture the intensity of the day's experiences. But it preserves the essential facts that might be important for future reference, and provides a record of the family's growth and development. As each family member settles into their beds, they carry with them the satisfaction of having met serious challenges successfully, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing they can handle whatever tomorrow might bring. But perhaps most importantly, they also carry the strengthened relationships and deepened sense of community that will serve them well throughout the challenging months and years ahead. The last sound in the Henderson house is Martha's soft humming of an old hymn as she settles Elizabeth for the night. A peaceful end to a day that began before dawn and included more adventure, challenge, and growth than many people experience in much longer periods. 9 p.m. As quiet settles over the Henderson homestead and the family drifts toward sleep, the day's events continue to resonate with meaning that extends far beyond their immediate experiences. What they've lived through represents the essential spirit of colonial American life. The remarkable ability of ordinary people to face extraordinary challenges with courage, creativity, and mutual support. The medical emergency that began their day taught them about the life and death responsibilities that colonial communities shared with each other. The official announcements about new taxes and military obligations showed them how larger political and economic forces affected individual families. The storm that seemed like a disaster revealed hidden resources that could transform their future prospects. And the community meeting that ended their active day demonstrated how individual families could work together to create opportunities that benefited everyone. Each of these experiences has contributed to the growth and education of every family member. Martha has deepened her confidence in her medical skills and her ability to manage complex situations. Thomas has strengthened his relationships with neighbors while taking on expanded responsibilities for community leadership. Samuel has crossed the threshold from childhood toward adult capability and responsibility. Mary has discovered that she can handle significant challenges and contribute meaningfully to family and community welfare. Even baby Elizabeth has provided the family with experiences of healing and resilience. But beyond their individual growth, the Henderson family has also strengthened their connections to the community that makes their survival and prosperity possible. The relationships they've built and deepened today will serve them well throughout the coming months as they work to meet their tax obligations, manage the risks of military service, and take advantage of new economic opportunities. As Martha performs the final task of her long day, banking the fire so it will provide coals for tomorrow. Morning's kindling. She reflects on the circular nature of colonial life. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities, requiring the same kind of adaptability, cooperation, and courage that today demanded. But tomorrow will also begin with advantages that didn't exist when today began. The family now knows about Ezra Thompson's additional land and resources. They have concrete plans for expanded crop production. They've established stronger relationships with neighbors who share their commitment to mutual support. And perhaps most importantly, they've proven to themselves that they can handle whatever circumstances arise. The soft breathing of sleeping children and the gentle crackling of the banked fire create a peaceful atmosphere that contrasts sharply with the day's intense activities. But this peace is unto the absence of challenge. It is the quiet satisfaction that comes from meeting challenges successfully and being prepared for whatever tomorrow might bring. Outside, the storm has completely passed, leaving clear skies and the promise of good weather for the work ahead. The damaged buildings can be repaired. The fallen tree will provide useful lumber, and the community relationships forged in crisis will provide strength for future cooperation. As Martha finally settles into bed beside Thomas, with baby Elizabeth sleeping peacefully nearby, she thinks about the generations of colonial women who have faced similar days of challenge and opportunity. Their experiences, passed down through families and communities, have created the knowledge and traditions that made today's successes possible. And looking forward, she realizes that today's experiences will become part of the wisdom that Samuel and Mary will someday pass on to their own children and communities. The lessons of courage, cooperation, and creative problem-solving that they've learned will help future generations face their own challenges with confidence and skill. In this way, today's extraordinary day becomes part of the continuing story of colonial American life. A story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things through hard work, mutual support, and unwavering determination to build good lives for themselves and their communities. The gentle sounds of a colonial household settling into sleep, the soft whisper of dying embers, kum, the quiet breathing of a close-knit family, the distant call of a night bird, create a peaceful end to a day that will be remembered and treasured for years to come. And tomorrow, as the sun rises over the same landscape that witnessed today's adventures, the Henderson family will wake to new possibilities and new challenges, carrying with them the strength, wisdom, and community bonds that made today's successes possible. But that, as they say, is tomorrow's story. As we reach the end of our gentle journey through this single day in colonial America, I hope you've gained a new appreciation for the remarkable resilience, creativity, and community spirit that our ancestors brought to their daily lives. The Henderson family's experiences show us that ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges could create extraordinary solutions through hard work, mutual support, and unwavering determination. Their story reminds us that the challenges we face in our own lives, while different in their specifics, can be met with the same spirit of cooperation, creativity, and courage that sustained colonial communities through much more difficult circumstances than most of us will ever encounter. What aspects of colonial life surprised you the most? What lessons from Martha and Thomas's approach to challenges might be useful in our modern lives? And what questions do you still have about daily life in colonial America? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from viewers about these journeys into our shared history. And if you enjoyed this gentle exploration of colonial life, please give the video a like and consider sharing it with others who might find these stories interesting and inspiring. The past has so much to teach us about resilience, community, and finding joy and meaning even in the most challenging circumstances. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and sweet dreams as you reflect on the remarkable strength and wisdom of the people who built the foundations of our nation, one challenging day at a time.